make up lesson plan for my field experience for SEC 525. Okay, this lesson is going to focus on the constant of proportionality, and I'm just going to get kind of started. So the first thing I'm going to do when my students walk in is welcome them and then have this warm-up displayed on the whiteboard. When students walk in, I'm going to direct them to get their learning journals and then have them start to look at this warm-up. I'm going to ask students to analyze these 3 different tables and ask them to compare them. Look for similarities, contrast between them all. As students are working on this, I'm going to ask them to do it silently so that I am able to walk around, check homework, check in with students, take attendance, kind of get students to just into the math zone. So I would ask students to look at this. As students start to finish up, I'm going to ask them to just turn to their partner and to discuss their ideas for a few minutes. So when students are discussing their ideas for a few minutes, I'm going to be walking around trying to listen to what students are saying so I can get an idea of what students are understanding, what kind of out-of-the-box thinking they may be having. Okay, so students wrap up. I'm going to ask them to talk to me and to discuss as a class what are some similarities and some contrasts that they came up with. And then as students explain these, I'm going to take notes. So for example, students might say that they realize that this one's talking about words per minute and this one's talking about blueberries and this one's talking about licorice. So I would write down maybe different concepts slash topics. I will do differences. It's a little backwards. I'll do differences right here and maybe similarities on this side. I continue to call on some students to have them give me some examples. Maybe students might say that they all start at 0. So I'd say start at 0. Students may say they're growing by a certain amount. I want students to be thinking about how this one is growing by 200 over 5 maybe, and they can say that it's going by 40 every single time. Or maybe they realize this one's growing by 80 between 2. Same for this one, they could realize, oh, to go from 0 buckets to 2 buckets, it grows by 60, and divided by 2 is equal to 30. This lesson is going to be with the reference that students already know what they're going to be talking about. Students already know about finding unit rate and constant proportionality. This whole lesson is going to be a wrap up about what we've been learning in class. Students may see that, oh, for 1 bundle of licorice, they get, for one bundle, they get 5. So maybe they'll say, oh, it grows by 5 every single time. They may look at the growth rates. They may realize that maybe this one's going by odd numbers. This one needs to be going by evens. This one's going by odds. This one skips to 5. This one goes by 2s. This one goes to 1 and then 2 and then by 2 again. I'm just looking for students to think outside of the box. There's no wrong or right answer for this one. It's just getting students to use some higher order thinking, looking for relationships, looking for connections, looking for similarities and differences. Once we've gone through that, I'm going to go ahead and transition to a review. So I would put this up on the board and just ask students, okay, we've been learning about constant proportionality. Think to yourself for a second what that means. Feel free to turn to your notes that we have already written on this and see what you guys can come up with. Maybe students, I'll ask them what they think this is, think to themselves for a second, and then I'll ask a few students to turn to their partners and to discuss what they think. Students may say that it's unit rate. students may say it's the something per something else. For example, like for in our example from our warm-up, they can say it's the number of blueberries per the one bucket, or number of words read per a minute. Students may talk about it like that. They may say it's what it grows by. Students might give a variety of answers, and that's what I'm looking for, to see what students kind of like a wrap up of this, not really this unit, but end of it. So just to see what students know. So hopefully students will say it's the unit rate, the price per something. They may call it that. It's the variable that we're going to be using. And so as students go to this, I'm going to have them focus on the word unit rate. Maybe give me examples of unit rates that they see in their day-to-day life. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to ask students, okay, what are some ways that we can represent the constant of proportionality? I'm going to have them think to themselves for a second, turn to a partner, and discuss the different ways. As students are doing this, I'm going to be walking around the classroom, asking them what they think, maybe asking some students for their answers, so I can have students to call on when I go back up front to ask for this. Looking to see if students have an idea of what this means. By this time, we're hopefully going to have gone over the different representations, so the graphs, the table, the equation, and so on. So I'd call on some students, and hopefully they would say maybe the equation is one way to represent this. Another way students may say is by a graph, a table, with the word problem could be an example, by words, and that's really what I'm going to be looking for. And then as students do that, I'm going to remind them, give myself like a pat on the back. That's awesome. And next thing we're going to do is transition to an activity and an example, and this example is going to be like an I do, we do, you do. It's in a preview to the students what I'm going to ask for them to do for the rest of the lesson. I'm going to read through this. Alex works at a store. A customer comes in and buys 2 boxes of muffins. Alex gives the customer 12 muffins. Find the unit rate. Remember that unit rate means 1, so 1 unit. And for this example, we'll look, okay, does it mean 1 muffin or 1 of the boxes? And they'll say it's 1 box, and then we're going to work through it. 12 muffins come in 2. And so how many muffins will come in 1 box? They can look at this fraction and try to simplify it. Divide by 2, divide by 2. We're going to get 6 over 1. So 6 muffins come in 1 box. That's our unit rate. And then the next thing I'm going to do with the students is ask them to solve and represent the problem with a table, a graph, an equation, and then state the constant of proportionality. For a table, I'm going to remind students that this is x and this is y. So our x will be usually the smaller unit. So this is y over x. So this would be the number of boxes. This will be the number of muffins. And then remind them that the constant of proportionality, what does it always start with? Hopefully they say it starts with a 0 and 0. And then we'll work through, giving me easy numbers to plug in. And we know that 2 is 12, and we know that 1 box has 6. And if they don't see that it's going to be 18 right off the bat, I'm going to have them, okay, well, from 0 to 1 box, it increased by 6. And from 1 box to 2 boxes, it increased by 6. So from 2 boxes to 3 boxes, it's also going to increase by 6. So then 12 plus the 6 gives you the 18. And then with the graph, just going to review with them what it means. What's the x-axis? What's the y-axis? And as I'm working through this, I'm going to have students copy this down in their notebook so that they can use it as an example when they move on to the next part of the lesson. Going to go through this kind of quickly right now just for the sake of the time for this video, but I would ask students to help me graph it. Labeling down here, this is the number of boxes. This is the number of muffins. And then graphing, just gonna graph by fives for the time being. 5, 10, 15, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Might be one too many in that. And then just graphing it, so using this to graph right here. 0, 0 is always important. Right there in one box, you have 6 muffins, so you go to 1 up to 6, and then 2 up to 12, and then 3 up to 18. I might have students come up to the front and help me by graphing these points, giving them more practice, observing that it's a straight line and that the proportional relationship always has a straight line. And then moving on to the equation, we're asking students if they remember what the equation is that we always use for the constant of proportionality and for proportional problems, having them turn to a partner and discuss it, and then asking for answers. Hopefully hearing they get y equals kx. Well, k is the constant of proportionality. And then for our example, whatever it's growing by is k, so y equals 6k. And then the constant of proportionality is going to be k equals n6. And then also writing it as a unit rate, which is just 6 muffins over one box. And then asking students if they have any questions, discussing this. What are some relationships that they see between these? Maybe they see that they can use the table to make the graph, or use the graph to make the table. If they're given only one of these, how can they use it to make all the other ones? I'd have them write these ideas in their learning journal, and then have them discuss it with a friend, and then make a class list of how these all relate to one another, how you can see the constant of proportionality in every single one, maybe where it's at, how they are involved with one another, and how they just relate to one another. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just instruct students for the activity that we're going to be doing. So the activity students are going to be doing is making their own, in groups, they're going to make their own poster, and they're going to be given a piece of paper with like a little word problem like this, and students are going to just trying to figure out, walking through the same steps that we did, the unit rate, and then graphing everything, making a table, an equation, and constant of proportionality. Students are just going to work through that. I'm going to give them instructions. This is going to be the checklist they're going to be using. I'm going to give them a piece of paper before they are able to make their big final show of things. I'm going to have them work it out in their teams and their notebooks. I'm going to walk around, answer any questions, have students work together, and show me the problem and show me their answers before they move on. When I see that students are ready, they have the right answer, I answer any confusions. I'm going to give them a big piece of poster paper and have them make sure that they include the constant of proportionality, a table, a graph, equation, description, and to be creative and to be neat. And then when students are all finished with this, hopefully it takes them the rest of the whole class period. If it takes them longer, we'll move on the next class time I see them. And then when students are all done with this, making everything looks nice, everyone's happy with their stuff, we discuss things a little bit, I'm going to have students go to their learning log and just answer a few questions, just asking students to reflect on the activity. What do they like? What do they not like? Which representation do they think is easy to use? Which one is more challenging to use out of all these 4? Which one do they like more? What do you feel confident about, not so confident? And then asking students to go back to the warm-up that we did and to find the constant of proportionality for all those. So showing them these again on the board, having them try to find the unit rate for these, and then having them think of any outside examples for unit rate, just so they can connect this, what we're learning in class, to outside of the classroom. And then wrap this activity up with any discussions, have students present to me what they felt went well, what they felt they could have improved on, and then have students clean up and pack up and send them on their way.